Two cops stopped a black man on a calm, quiet street, accusing him of a crime he had absolutely no involvement in. They had no idea that he was the state's chief prosecutor, ready to reveal their lies and expose the corruption within the system. What followed was something that stunned everyone. But let's rewind and begin at the start. David Miller, a tall, middle-aged black man, dressed in a sharp navy suit, was walking through the peaceful suburban streets of Woodrest. It was late, and the streetlights' glow cast long shadows on the empty road. David, exhausted after a long day preparing for a major case, was heading home. The briefcase in his hand felt heavier than usual, but his mind buzzed with thoughts of his strategy for the following day. As he turned a corner, the familiar red and blue lights of a police cruiser flashed across the street. David stopped immediately, raising his hand slightly, signaling that he posed no threat. The cruiser slowed and parked next to him, and two officers stepped out. "Evening," said Officer Barnes, a stocky man in his 40s, his face twisted into a cynical smirk. "What are you doing out here this late? Walking alone?" David responded calmly, keeping his voice steady. "Is there a problem, officer?" Barnes exchanged a look with his younger partner, Officer Grant, who seemed unsure. "We got a call about a burglary," Barnes said, crossing his arms. "You fit the description." David blinked in confusion. "A burglary? I just left my office downtown. I'm a lawyer." Barnes scoffed with a humorless laugh. "A lawyer, huh? So, what's in the briefcase?" "Stolen goods." Grant shifted awkwardly, but didn't say a word. "I can assure you," David said firmly, "it's just legal documents. You're welcome to check." Without asking, Barnes grabbed the briefcase and opened it, ignoring David's protests. He began flipping through the neatly stacked papers. "Huh," Barnes said with feigned surprise. "Looks like someone's trying a little too hard to look innocent. This is harassment." David's voice was firm now. "I haven't done anything wrong." "That's for us to decide," Barnes retorted sharply. "Turn around, hands behind your back." David's patience was wearing thin. "On what grounds?" he demanded. "You have no evidence." Barnes roughly grabbed David and cuffed him before he could say another word. "Resisting arrest for starters," he growled. "Let's see what else we can charge you with." Grant hesitated, but then reached for his radio. "We're bringing in a suspect," he muttered, avoiding David's glare. David's heart was racing, but not out of fear, out of pure anger. He was shoved into the back of the cruiser, his mind vowing that this injustice would not go unchallenged. At the station, David was led into a cold, fluorescent-lit booking area, the air thick with the scent of disinfectant and stale coffee. The hum of ringing phones and muffled voices added to the oppressive atmosphere. Officer Barnes, his smirk as sharp as his attitude, took charge of processing David, while Officer Grant stood awkwardly by the door. Steel bars and peeling paint surrounded David as he sat in the cold cell. In the adjacent room, Barnes began typing up the charges. His report painted David as a dangerous criminal: burglary, resisting arrest, and possession of stolen property. The truth was irrelevant. Barnes created a narrative to justify his actions, twisting every detail to his advantage. Grant, standing nearby with his arms crossed, his jaw clenched, seemed to wrestle with an internal struggle. But his silence said everything. Compliance, even if it meant sacrificing justice, was the easier choice. In the sterile quiet of his cell, David sat on a hard bench bolted to the wall. He stared at the floor, his mind swirling with disbelief and anger. Through the bars, he could hear Barnes boasting to another officer in the hallway. "Another one off the streets," Barnes chuckled. "Can't wait to see the look on his face when the court throws the book at him." David's fists clenched in fury. The man who had spent his life fighting against systemic racism was now its victim. His pulse raced, a mixture of anger and resolve. He wasn't just going to walk away from this, he was going to fight. The next morning, David used his one phone call to contact his legal team. By noon, his assistant Rachel stormed into the station, carrying a stack of evidence that not only disproved the charges but also hinted at Barnes's misconduct. Within hours, David was released. His freedom was hard-won, but it wasn't enough. As he walked out, his mind was laser-focused on one thing: exposing the corruption that had nearly ruined him. A week later, the courtroom was buzzing with tension, every seat filled with spectators, reporters, and legal professionals eager for the trial to begin. At the prosecution table, Officer Barnes sat back with a confident posture, a smug expression on his face, while Officer Grant fidgeted beside him, discomfort radiating from him as he avoided making eye contact. Between them sat Patricia Reynolds, the district's formidable star prosecutor, known for her relentless tough-on-crime stance. She sifted through her notes methodically, casting only a cursory glance at David as he entered the room. David, however, walked in with the poise of a man who held all the cards. His tailored suit and calm demeanor commanded attention. As he approached the defense table, he set his briefcase down with deliberate precision. The room fell silent when the judge entered and called the court to order. As the proceedings began, David stood and spoke with steady clarity. "Your Honor, I will be representing myself." The next hour, David dismantled the prosecution's case with surgical precision. He started by presenting video footage from a nearby ATM, time-stamped to prove he was nowhere near the scene of the alleged burglary. The clarity of the footage left no room for doubt. Then came the bombshell, an audio recording from the squad car. The courtroom held its breath as Barnes's voice played over the speakers, mocking David and admitting that no suspect even fit the description of the alleged criminal. Reynolds fired off objections one after another, but each was swiftly overruled. The evidence was undeniable. Finally, David called Officer Grant to the stand. The young officer hesitated, his hands shaking as he was sworn in. Under David's measured, yet pointed questioning, Grant cracked. "It wasn't right," he admitted, his voice barely audible. "There was no evidence. Barnes. He told me to make it look legitimate." The courtroom erupted into shock and hushed murmurs. Barnes shot to his feet, shouting, "He's lying." But the damage had been done. The truth had torn apart their facade, leaving only the wreckage of their lies. With the case crumbling, Reynolds abruptly requested a recess. But David wasn't finished. He stood again, his voice unwavering. "Your Honor," he began, "there's one more piece of evidence I'd like to submit." He approached the bench and handed the judge a file. "This is my resume," David said, turning to face the room. "Before the officers arrested me without cause, before they fabricated charges, I was preparing for this week's trial. You see, I'm not just a lawyer. I'm the chief prosecutor of this state." The room fell into stunned silence. "I will not stand for corruption," David continued, his voice rising. "Not in my office, not in my state, and certainly not from those sworn to uphold the law." Barnes paled, his bravado slipping away. Reynolds looked down, defeated. The judge called for order, and within moments the charges against David were dismissed. But the fallout was far from over. David filed a formal complaint against Barnes, which led to an internal investigation uncovering years of misconduct. Barnes was stripped of his badge, while Grant, though complicit, cooperated fully, earning a second chance under probation. Weeks later, David stood at a podium outside the courthouse, addressing a crowd of reporters. "This isn't just about me," he said. "It's about a system that allows injustice to thrive. But together, We can change it.